When one of the most famous men on the planet looked out the window of his car and saw a homeless man sitting on a cardboard box in the freezing cold. He almost kept driving. Almost. But something made him look twice. Maybe it was the shape of the man's shoulders. Maybe it was the way his head hung forward like someone who had completely given up. Or maybe it was that tiny scar, barely visible above the man's right eyebrow, that sent a shock straight through Michael Jordan's chest, like a bolt of lightning on a clear day. Because Michael knew that scar. He had been staring at it since he was 9 years old. The man sitting on that cardboard box, dirty, freezing, alone, was the same boy who had knocked Michael's science project out of his hands in a school hallway 34 years ago. You were the same boy who had thrown his basketball over a fence, who had pushed him into a trash can in front of everyone, who had spent 2 years making young Michael feel like he was worth absolutely nothing. The same boy whose cruel voice had lived inside Michael Jordan's head for 3 decades. And right now, that boy was sitting on the cold ground with a paper cup and a few coins, while Michael sat in a warm luxury SUV worth more than most people's houses. Michael put his hand on the door handle. His driver looked in the rearview mirror with wide eyes, and Michael said 2 words that changed everything that happened next. Now, here is where it gets unbelievable. Because what Michael pulled out of his coat pocket when he walked up to that man did not just change one life. It broke every single person who witnessed it wide open. His driver, a stranger on the sidewalk, a store owner who had seen everything in 22 years on that block. Every single one of them ended up in tears. But that is not even the biggest part of the story. Because tucked at the bottom of what Michael handed, that man was something so unexpected, something that had been quietly arranged over 3 years without anyone knowing, that when the man opened it and saw what was inside, his knees gave out completely. What was it? Stay with me through this entire story, because by the time you reach the end, you will understand why this is not just a story about Michael Jordan. It is a story about what it truly costs to forgive someone. What happens when mercy shows up where nobody expected it. And what a little girl named Amara had been holding on to for 6 long years, waiting and hoping and believing that her father would one day find his way back. This is that day. And it starts on a cold Tuesday morning in February, on a forgotten street in Chicago, with a wrong turn that was never really a wrong turn at all. The black SUV moved slowly through a part of Chicago that had been forgotten by the rest of the city. It was a Tuesday morning in February, the kind of cold that doesn't just touch your skin. It gets inside your bones and stays there. The sky was the color of old concrete. The trees along the sidewalk were bare and black, like burnt matches stuck into frozen ground. Michael Jordan was supposed to be somewhere else. His driver, Theodore Ross, he had made a wrong turn 3 blocks back and was too proud to say it out loud. So now, the SUV was crawling down a street lined with tired brick buildings, a laundromat with one flickering light, and a corner store with a piece of plywood nailed over a broken window. Michael wasn't paying attention to any of that. He was reading something on his phone, a message from his team, something about a schedule change for the evening. Normal stuff. The kind of thing that fills up a famous man's day until his days start to feel less like a life and more like a calendar. Then Theodore slowed the car almost to a stop. "Construction up ahead," Theodore said quietly. "Give me a second." Michael looked up from his phone, and that is when he saw the man. He was sitting on a flattened cardboard box near a bus stop on the right side of the street, and his coat was thin, the wrong kind of thin for February in Chicago. His shoes were dark with water damage, the left sole separating from the upper like a mouth falling open. A paper coffee cup sat on the ground in front of him, with a few coins resting at the bottom. His head was bent forward. His chin nearly touched his chest. His hands rested on his knees, like they were too heavy to move. He looked like a man who had run out of fight. Michael almost looked away. He almost went back to his phone. He almost let Theodore find the detour and carried on with his Tuesday like nothing had happened. But something stopped him. It was small at first, just a feeling. The kind that taps you on the shoulder before your brain catches up. Michael leaned forward slightly in his seat. He looked harder at the man, the shape of his shoulders, and the way his left hand curled against his knee. And then, barely visible beneath the dirt and the gray stubble and the weight of years, a small scar, just above the right eyebrow. Michael's breath caught. His phone went dark in his hand. His whole body went still the way a man goes still when something shifts deep inside him. Not fear, not anger. Something older than both of those things. "Theodore," Michael said. His voice was low and completely calm. "Yes, sir?" "Pull over." Theodore glanced in the rearview mirror. "We're already running a few minutes." "Pull over," Michael said again. "Right here. Right now." The SUV stopped. Michael sat with his hand on the door handle for a long moment, staring through the tinted glass at the man on the cardboard box. The city moved around them. A bus, 2 pigeons. See, a woman pushing a stroller. But inside the car, everything was perfectly still. Because Michael Jordan had just recognized a face he had spent 30 years trying to forget. The man at the bus stop was Darnell Cruz, and Michael was already opening the door. But before his foot touched the cold pavement, something stopped him. Not a hand, not a voice, a memory. It hit him the way memories sometimes do, fast and total, like a wave that doesn't warn you before it knocks you flat. 1 second, he was a 59-year-old billionaire stepping out of a luxury SUV. The next second, he was 9 years old again, standing in a school hallway in Wilmington, North Carolina, holding the most important thing he had ever made. 34 years earlier, Michael Jeffrey Jordan had spent 2 full weeks building a model of the solar system. And he had used a cardboard base his father James cut for him in the garage. He had painted each planet himself with small brushes, mixing colors on a paper plate to get them exactly right. Jupiter had orange and cream swirls. Neptune was deep blue with a tiny white shimmer. Saturn, his favorite, had real yellow yarn wrapped carefully around its middle to make the rings. He had stayed up past his bedtime 3 nights in a row to finish it. He carried it to school on a Monday morning like it was made of glass. Room 14B was his 5th grade science class at Myrtle Grove Elementary. His teacher, Mrs. Patricia Ellison, had assigned each student to present their model to the class. Michael had practiced what he was going to say in the bathroom mirror the night before. He was nervous in the good way. The way you get nervous when you're proud of something and you want other people to see it too. He never made it to room 14B. He was 20 feet from the classroom door when Darnell Cruz came around the corner. Darnell was 12, big for his age. He moved through school hallways the way certain kids do, like the hallway belonged to him and everyone else was just borrowing it. Behind him were 2 boys, Marcus and a kid everyone called Stitch, who laughed on cue like a laugh track on a television show. Darnell didn't say anything when he passed Michael. He didn't even look at him. He just stuck out one hand as he walked by, casual, almost lazy, and knocked the solar system clean out of Michael's arms. The cardboard base hit the floor hard. The planets scattered in every direction. Jupiter rolled under a locker. Neptune bounced twice and cracked against the wall. Saturn slid to a stop near the water fountain, its yarn rings snapping apart into loose yellow threads on the tile floor. Darnell kept walking. His laugh echoed down the hallway. Michael stood completely still, staring at the broken pieces spread across the floor. His hands were empty. His chest felt like something had been taken out of it. A few kids walked past. Some looked. Nobody stopped. He got down on his knees and picked up every piece he could find. He collected them in his arms like someone gathering the pieces of something that could never really be fixed. He made it through the school day. He held everything together until he got home. His mother, Dolores, found him on the back porch that evening, still in his school clothes, staring at the broken model sitting on the step beside him. She sat down without a word and put her arm around his shoulders. "Tell me," she said softly, and Michael told her everything. Back on the Chicago sidewalk, Michael's foot found the cold ground. He stood up straight, closed the car door quietly behind him, and walked toward the bus stop, toward Darnell Cruz, toward the memory he had carried in his body for 34 years. His face was unreadable. His steps were slow and even. The February wind pushed against him, but he didn't pull his coat tighter. He just kept walking. The bus stop was maybe 30 feet from the SUV. 30 feet of cracked sidewalk and cold morning air. But to Michael, each step felt longer than the last, like the distance between who he was now and who he had been kept stretching the closer he got. But he stopped about 4 feet away from the cardboard box. He looked down at the man sitting on it. Up close, Darnell Cruz looked smaller than Michael remembered. That was the strange thing. In Michael's memory, Darnell had always been enormous, filling hallways, filling playgrounds, filling the anxious dreams of a 9-year-old boy who never knew which version of a Tuesday was coming. But the man on the ground in front of him was just a man. Thin, cold, tired in a way that sleep alone couldn't fix. "Darnell," Michael said. The name came out steady, quiet, like a single knock on a door. The man's head lifted slowly. His eyes opened in stages, first cloudy, adjusting to the light, adjusting to being looked at directly by another human being. Then they focused, and everything in Darnell Cruz's face changed at once. The color left his skin. His jaw went slack. His eyes moved across Michael's face the way a man checks something twice because he doesn't trust what he's seeing the first time. Michael waited. A city bus rumbled past on the street behind him. Somewhere down the block, a car horn sounded twice and went quiet. Steam curled up from a sidewalk grate and disappeared into the gray sky. "It's me," Michael said. "Mike Jordan, from Myrtle Grove." Darnell's mouth opened. No words came out. He looked down at the paper cup in front of him, at the few coins sitting at the bottom, then back up at Michael, like he was measuring the distance between those two things and couldn't make the numbers work. "Mike," he finally said. Just that. One word. Barely enough air behind it to be called a sound. Michael did something then that nobody watching would have expected, though he crouched down. Right there on the cold, dirty sidewalk in February, Michael Jordan, 6 championships, 5 MVP awards, a man whose face had been on billboards in 40 countries, crouched down until his eyes were level with Darnell's. No space between them now. No height advantage. No distance. Just 2 men from the same small hallway in Wilmington, North Carolina, looking at each other across 34 years. "What happened to you?" Michael asked. His voice was not hard. It was not the voice of a man collecting something owed to him. It was honest and direct and completely human. Darnell looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed. Small and short and hollow. and the laugh of a man who has told his own story so many times inside his own head that it has stopped feeling real and started feeling like something that happened to someone else. "Everything," he said. And then the wall came down, slowly, brick by brick. Darnell Cruz started talking, and Michael Jordan stayed exactly where he was, crouched on that cold sidewalk, and he listened to every single word. It came out in pieces at first, slow and careful, the way water finds its way through cracked concrete. Not all at once, but steadily, quietly, until there is no stopping it. Darnell talked about growing up in a house where the loudest voice always won. His father, a man named Curtis Cruz, had been in and out of prison for most of Darnell's childhood. "Not a bad man at his core," Darnell said, "but a broken one. See, and broken people leave broken things behind them when they go." His mother, Vivian, had worked double shifts at a textile factory 6 days a week. She came home smelling like machine oil and exhaustion. She loved Darnell. He never doubted that. But love that is always tired looks a lot like absence when you are 12 years old and desperate for someone to notice you. So Darnell had found other ways to be noticed. He said that quietly, without excuses, just as a fact placed carefully on the table between them. Michael didn't respond. He just kept listening. There had been good years after school, Darnell said. He had joined the army at 19, served 2 tours, came back with a straight back and a sense of structure he had never had before. Found work at a manufacturing plant on the south side of Chicago. Met a woman named Renee. Had a daughter they named Amara, who came into the world on a Wednesday morning in April and immediately became the only thing Darnell had ever been completely sure about. Then the plant closed. Then the money ran out. Then the arguments with Renee got longer and the silences got heavier until one morning the silences just became permanent. Then Amara was gone too. Not dead, not lost, just out of reach in the specific way that people become out of reach when you have nothing solid left to offer them. The streets had arrived slowly after that. A couch here, a shelter there, a cardboard box at a bus stop on a Tuesday morning in February. When Darnell finished talking, his hands were shaking in his lap. He pressed them flat against his knees to make them stop. Michael stayed quiet for a moment, and the city continued around them, indifferent and moving and loud, but between these two men, there was a stillness that felt separate from all of it. "I know what I did to you," Darnell said suddenly. His voice dropped so low Michael had to lean slightly forward to hear it. "I was a kid, but I knew exactly what I was doing, Mike. I knew it hurt you, and I did it anyway." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I've thought about it. More than you'd believe. More than I can explain." Michael studied his face. "I believe you," he said. Darnell looked up, surprised, like those 3 words were the last 3 words he had ever expected to hear. Michael held his gaze and said nothing more for a moment. He was thinking about a phone call, a folder, a name printed on a sheet of paper that had stopped him cold in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. Because here is the thing this story has not told you yet. Michael Jordan, crouching on that sidewalk, was not an accident. The wrong turn Theodore took that morning, the one that brought the black SUV down this forgotten street on this specific Tuesday, was not a wrong turn at all. Theodore Ross had driven exactly where Michael had asked him to drive. Michael had known Darnell Cruz was on this street. He had known for 3 years, and it had taken him every single day of those 3 years to find the courage to open that car door. It had started with a folder. 2 years earlier, Michael's assistant, Priya Nambiar, had knocked on his office door during a Tuesday afternoon meeting and slipped inside holding a thin stack of papers against her chest. "I flagged something," she said quietly. From the Chicago Outreach Review. I think you need to see it. Priya was not a woman who interrupted meetings without a reason. Michael had excused himself and taken the papers into the hallway. The top sheet was a standard intake form. Name, age, military service record, current housing status. The kind of form that reduced an entire human life down to a single page and somehow still managed to carry the full weight of it. Michael read the name at the top. Darnell Cruz, age 44, Wilmington, North Carolina native, U.S. Army veteran, no permanent address. He read it once, then he read it again. Then he folded the paper carefully along its original crease, handed the rest of the stack back to Priya without a word, walked back into his office, closed the door, and stood at the window for a very long time. Outside, Chicago moved below him the way it always did, busy and indifferent and enormous. Thousands of people going somewhere, thousands of lives brushing against each other at crosswalks and coffee shops and bus stops without ever knowing the full weight of what the person standing next to them was carrying. Michael placed the folded paper face down on his desk. He did not touch it for 3 weeks. Because the honest truth, the truth that Michael had never spoken out loud to anyone except his mother, was that Darnell Cruz had lived in him for a long time. Not as a monster, not anymore, but as a voice, low and stubborn, the kind that surfaces at 3 a.m. when the trophies are in another room and the silence gets too wide. You're nothing, Jordan. He had turned that voice into fuel for 30 years, burned it like coal in an engine and built something extraordinary on top of it. But fuel and healing are not the same thing. And Michael Jordan, for all that he had built, had never fully put down the weight of that hallway in Wilmington. He called his mother on a Thursday evening. "Mama," he said, "remember the boy I told you about? The one from school? Darnell?" "I remember," Dolores said. Her voice was careful, patient the way it had always been patient with him. "I found him. He's in Chicago. He's been living on the streets for 2 years." Michael paused. He applied to our outreach program and got turned away because we were full. The silence on the other end of the line was not empty. It was thinking. "Michael," Dolores said finally, "what does your heart tell you to do?" "It tells me to help him," Michael said, without hesitating. "But Mama, I don't know what's going to come up in me when I see his face. I don't know if I'm ready for that." Dolores took a slow breath. "Baby," she said, "the size of your mercy is not measured by how much a person deserved it. It's measured by how much it costs you to give it." Michael closed his eyes. He held those words somewhere in the center of his chest, where they settled, like something that had always belonged there, but had only just arrived. He picked the folder back up the very next morning. He spent the following months working quietly with Priya and a social worker named Gloria Tate to locate Darnell, understand his situation fully, and arrange everything that needed to be arranged. A room, a program, a path, not handed to Darnell, but placed in front of him. The walking would have to be his own. Michael had not reached out, had not sent a message, had not driven down that street, but he had waited until something inside him was completely settled. And on a cold Tuesday morning in February, riding in a black SUV through a part of Chicago that had been forgotten by the rest of the city, Michael Jordan had finally felt that stillness arrive. He had leaned forward and said 2 quiet words to Theodore. "Turn here." Now, crouched on the sidewalk with the city moving around them, Michael reached slowly into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a white envelope. It was sealed, thick. Darnell's full name was written across the front in Michael's own careful handwriting. Darnell stared at it like it might not be real. "What is this?" he asked. Michael held it out and said the two simplest words he could find. "Open it!" Darnell's hands shook as he worked his finger under the flap. He pulled out a single card, cream-colored, heavy paper, and read the handwritten note on the front. His lips moved slightly as he read. Then he stopped moving entirely. He read it again. Behind the card was a second sheet, a formal letter on program letterhead confirming full enrollment in a transitional housing and workforce re-entry program. 6 months. Paid in full. Every detail arranged and waiting. The paper trembled in Darnell's hands. His shoulders pulled inward. His jaw tightened. He was fighting something large and rising and unstoppable. The way a man fights it when he has spent years learning that hope is just the thing that makes the falling hurt worse. But this time, he could not fight it down. His whole body shook once, deep and hard. And then Darnell Cruz pressed the back of his fist against his mouth and made a sound that was not a word and not a cry, but something rawer than both. Michael placed one hand firmly on Darnell's shoulder and kept it there. He did not look away. He did not shift his weight or check the time or reach for his phone. He simply stayed. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is refuse to leave while someone else falls apart. After a long moment, Darnell looked up with wet eyes and a broken voice and asked the only question that mattered. "Why?" he whispered. "Mike, after everything I did to you, why?" Michael looked at him steadily. "Because," he said slowly, "my mother told me something when I was 9 years old. I was standing on a back porch with a broken solar system in my lap." He paused. "She told me that people who hurt others are usually people who are hurting themselves." Darnell's face crumpled. "I'm sorry," he managed. "God, Mike, I am so—" "I know you are," Michael said, "but let me finish." His voice was firm and kind at the same time, the way a hand can be firm and kind when it pulls someone up from the ground. "Your voice was in my head for 30 years. Every time someone told me I wasn't good enough, every time I wanted to stop." He held Darnell's gaze. "Part of who I became is because of you." Darnell stared at him. Michael stood up slowly and extended his hand downward. Open, steady, waiting. "Stand up, Darnell," he said quietly. Darnell looked at the hand for a long moment. Then he took it. Michael pulled him to his feet. Darnell stood unsteady on the cold sidewalk, blinking, still holding the envelope. And then Michael spoke again. "There's one more thing inside there," he said. "Look at the bottom." Darnell reached back into the envelope. His fingers found something small and flat, tucked neatly against the bottom seam. He pinched it carefully and pulled it out. It was a photograph. Small, slightly worn at the edges. The kind of photograph that gets printed at a pharmacy counter and carried in someone's wallet until the corners soften. A young girl looked back at him from the image, maybe 10 or 11 years old. Dark eyes that were wide and serious, and bright all at the same time. A gap between her two front teeth. A purple backpack over one shoulder. She was standing in front of a school entrance, caught mid-laugh. I, like whoever took the photo, had said something funny at exactly the right second. Darnell's throat closed. He turned the photograph over with shaking fingers. On the back, written in a woman's neat, careful handwriting, were 2 sentences. "Her name is Amara. She still asks about you." The sound that came out of Darnell Cruz then was not something he chose to make. It came from somewhere beneath choice, beneath pride, beneath the years of hardness he had built around himself like a second skin just to survive. It came from the place in a person that never stops being the child they once were. no matter how much time and damage gets stacked on top of it. His knees buckled. Michael caught him by the arm before he went down, one hand gripping Darnell's elbow, holding him upright on the sidewalk. Darnell pressed the photograph against his chest with both hands. His whole body shook. He squeezed his eyes shut, and tears ran freely down his face, and he didn't try to stop them. He just held the photograph like it was the most valuable thing he had ever touched. Because it was. "That's from Renee," Michael said quietly, when Darnell's breathing had steadied enough to hear. "I didn't arrange that part. When she found out someone was working to help you get back on your feet, she sent it on her own." "That came from her, Darnell. Not from me." Darnell opened his eyes. He looked at Michael with an expression that had no name. Something between devastation and the first thin light of something he had stopped believing in a long time ago. Across the street, Theodore Ross sat behind the wheel of the black SUV, staring straight ahead with glassy eyes, finding something very interesting to examine on the dashboard. A young woman named Cassandra Webb, who had pulled her car over thinking someone needed medical help, stood frozen on the sidewalk half a block away, one hand pressed flat against her mouth. Mr. Olusegun Adeyemi, who had run the corner store for 22 years and believed he had seen every possible thing a city block could show a person, stood in his doorway with his arms crossed over his chest and his chin tucked down and his eyes wet and bright. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The whole street held its breath. Then Michael reached back into the SUV and pulled out a second envelope, larger than the first, heavier. He held it out to Darnell. "I kept this one separate," Michael said. "I didn't want to give it to you until you were standing." Darnell took it slowly. He opened it. Inside was a printed stack of emails, pages of them. At the very top of the first page was a name that made Darnell's vision blur before he had even finished reading it. Amara Cruz. 8 months of emails, between Priya Nambiar and his daughter. His 11-year-old daughter, who still had her mother's careful handwriting and her father's wide, dark eyes, had been asked one simple question 8 months ago. "Is there anything you want your father to know?" She had written back in less than an hour. Darnell read her email slowly. Every sentence. His lips moved. His breathing stopped twice and started again. The last line of Amara's email read, "Tell him I saved a seat for him at my school. Play in March. It's the 14th. I never stopped saving it." Darnell lowered the pages. He looked at Michael Jordan standing in front of him on a cold Chicago sidewalk on a Tuesday morning in February. This man who owed him absolutely nothing. This man who had every reason in the world to have driven past without slowing down. And he could not find a single word in any language that was large enough for what he felt. Michael looked back at him steadily. "March 14th, Michael said. "You've got 6 weeks." He let that sit for just a moment. "Use them." Then he turned and walked back to the SUV. Theodore had the engine running. The heat was on. Everything was exactly as Michael had left it. The leather seat, the dim interior light, the faint sound of the city outside the tinted windows. Everything was exactly the same. And yet, nothing was. Here Michael settled into his seat and pulled the door shut behind him. The sounds of the street disappeared. Theodore adjusted his hands on the steering wheel and stared straight ahead with the careful stillness of a man pretending he had not just been crying into a fast food napkin. Michael noticed. He said nothing about it. He looked out the window as the SUV pulled away from the curb. Through the tinted glass, he could see Darnell still standing at the bus stop. Upright now, both envelopes held against his chest, the photograph somewhere safe inside his coat pocket close to his heart. He was not looking at the car. He was looking down at his own 2 feet planted on the sidewalk, like he was reminding himself that the ground was still there. Like he was deciding what to do with it. Michael watched him until the street disappeared behind a corner. Then he looked forward and let out a long, slow breath. The kind that carries something out of the body that has been stored there for a very long time. His phone lit up in his lap. Schedules. Messages. The ordinary machinery of his life reassembling itself around him. He turned it face down. At 6:47 on the evening of March 14th, a 5th-grade girl named Amara Cruz walked out onto the stage of a school auditorium on Chicago's South Side in a white dress and yellow sash. Before she took her first mark, she did what every child does in that first breathless moment under the lights. She looked into the audience for one specific face. 3rd row, aisle seat. A man in a clean gray jacket, fresh haircut, hands folded quietly in his lap, her eyes that were tired the way eyes get tired after a long road, but present, fully and completely present in a way they had not been in years. Darnell Cruz looked back at his daughter from the 3rd row and did not bother trying to hold anything in. He had stopped doing that. On the empty seat beside him sat a single cream-colored note card. No envelope. No letterhead. Just 6 words in familiar handwriting, resting quietly in the space between where a father sat and the stage where his daughter stood. "I knew you'd make it." Mike Amara found her father's face and held it for exactly 1 second. The way you hold something precious when you finally stop being afraid it might disappear. Then she smiled. The full version. The real one. And the smile she had been saving since the day she wrote an email at 11 years old and pressed send before she could change her mind. Choosing, the way children sometimes do, with a wisdom that shames the rest of us, to believe that the person she loved was still worth believing in. The lights came up. The music started. And in the 3rd row of a school auditorium on a March evening in Chicago, a man who had once sat on cardboard at a bus stop watched his daughter step into the light and understood, for the first time in a very long time, exactly what he was still here for. Before you go, drop a comment right now and tell me where you are watching this from. It could be a small town nobody has heard of, or a big city on the other side of the world. I read every single one, and I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this story moved you even a little, if it made you feel something real, please hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, but it tells the world that stories about kindness and forgiveness and second chances still matter. That people still want to see the good in each other. Every like helps this story reach one more person who might need to hear it today. And if you are new here, welcome. This channel is built on one simple idea, that the most powerful stories are not about fame or money or winning. They are about what people do when nobody is watching, about mercy that costs something, about love that shows up even when it does not have to. If that is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe right now and join this community. We are growing something good here, something worth being part of. And finally, do not leave just yet. Because the video appearing on your screen right now, it is one of the most powerful stories on this entire channel. People tell us they could not get through it without crying. Click it. Watch the whole thing. You will understand why. We will see you there.